Jack Hansen was sitting in his study at home, sunlight pouring through the window onto the floor and bookshelves filled with his favorite horror novels and mysteries. He was buried in a book when a gust of wind blew through and the window shook gently. He looked up and frowned. It was a quiet summer afternoon, and he lived in a small, isolated village where few people would visit him. Suddenly, an ancient letter slipped under the door into the study. Jack picks up the envelope in surprise. There is no address or sender's name written on it, only a blood-red mark that looks unusually odd. He carefully tore open the envelope, and inside was a piece of letterhead made of parchment that read in a strange script, "Dear Mr. Jack, you are invited to the Phantom Village, located in a remote mountain range. Please arrive on time in 3 days. Do not tell anyone of your destination. This is an opportunity you must not refuse." An inexplicable excitement and curiosity welled up in Jack's heart. He rubbed his eyes to make sure it wasn't his hallucination. His hands shook involuntarily. Then he looked up at the window and pondered the truth behind this invitation. Why had he been invited to this mysterious village? Why the secrecy? And why did he feel such intense interest? Jack looked at the blood-red seal, curiosity gradually overcoming fear in his mind. He decided to accept the invitation and travel to the Phantom Village to see what kind of secrets this mysterious place was hiding. He carefully put the letter back into the envelope and placed it on his desk. The afterglow of the setting sun poured over him, and he knew that from this moment on, his life would be filled with an unprecedented adventure. 3 days later, Jack drove an ancient automobile and embarked on a journey to the village of Phantom Shadow. His mood was both excited and nervous as the vehicle drove through the curved mountain road, the surrounding scenery gradually becoming unfamiliar and mysterious. The forest spread on both sides, and the sunlight poured onto the ground through the gaps in the leaves, creating dappled light and shadow. Jack drove intently, somewhat distracted by the doubts that welled up in his mind from time to time. He couldn't help but think of the mysterious letter and the blood-red mark, and the moment the voice whispered in his ear, the road became progressively more arduous. The mountains became more treacherous, and the road was rough. Jack had to drive slowly, occasionally going around boulders and collapsed dirt slopes. Nonetheless, his inner curiosity was undiminished, and he kept looking forward to what the Phantom Village would be like. At a particularly steep uphill section, Jack suddenly felt a strange sense of oppression, as if something had been watching him. He slowed down and glanced in the rearview mirror of the car, but saw nothing. He couldn't help but laugh, chiding himself for not being too nervous. However, when he looked up ahead again, his heart almost stopped beating. Not far away, in the woods, he seemed to see a blurry figure, eyes in the darkness outlining a shadow right in front of him. Jack braked hard, his entire body tensing as he stared unseeingly at the spot. However, when his eyes focused again, the figure had vanished. He wondered if he'd misread it or if he'd imagined it. He shook his head in an attempt to calm himself before continuing to drive forward. It was getting darker as the day wore on. Jack turned on the headlights, the glow bright in the darkness. Though he tried to remain calm, the tension in his mind grew stronger. He felt as if he was not alone on this road. In the darkness, his imagination began to drift, and it was as if he heard a low murmur, yet every time he tried to focus on it, there was nothing. This uneasy feeling stayed with him, making his journey an incredibly long one. Even though there was still a distance to travel ahead, Jack was beginning to look forward in his mind to when he would reach the Phantom Village. He told himself that once he reached his destination, all his questions and unease would be answered. However, deep within his heart, a hint of uneasiness was still stirring. Jack finally drove out of the treacherous mountain road and into a vast plain. However, just when he thought things were going to smooth out, A thick fog suddenly filled the area, as if it had emerged from nowhere. The fog quickly enveloped the entire surrounding area, reducing visibility to a very low level. Jack felt a bit suffocated, and he had to slow down the car and carefully continue on his way. The headlights were dimmed in the fog, as if they were swallowed up in a haze. His heart raced, and he began to feel a sense of isolation that he had never felt before. Even though he was inside the car, he still felt cut off from the rest of the world by this thick fog. He tried to peer through the window, but he couldn't see anything but a haze. Just then, he suddenly heard a faint sound, as if someone was speaking in a low voice. He immediately turned his head to look at the back seat of the car, but there was nothing there. His heart raced, and he felt a little fear. He wasn't sure if it was his imagination playing tricks on him, but he was sure he heard a voice. The fog grew thicker, as if invisible hands were gently brushing his cheeks. His vision became blurred, and the scene around him began to become distorted. Jack felt as if he was caught in a strange fantasy world where reality and illusion began to intertwine. He struggled to remain calm, trying to focus his thoughts. However, the harder he tried, the more confused his mind seemed to become. He felt an unnameable fear, as if something was creeping closer from the fog, but he was unable to see it clearly. Time seemed to blur in this eerie state. Jack didn't know exactly how long he had spent in the fog. All he knew was that he was getting more and more uneasy. He began to realize that everything here was unusual, and there seemed to be some kind of strange power hidden behind the thick fog. Just then, a light breeze blew through, and the fog began to gradually dissipate. Jack's vision became clear again, and he saw that he was driving into what appeared to be a village. The outlines of houses were gradually becoming visible, yet the village gave him an inexplicable sense of unease. He wondered just what kind of place he was about to enter. As the fog gradually dissipated, Jack's car finally pulled into what appeared to be a village. The outlines of the houses showed up, looking ancient and silent. Nonetheless, the sight of the village seemed to make people feel something unusual. The houses in the village were neatly spread out, and the quaint buildings exuded an air of antiquity. The tiles on the roofs were somewhat tattered by time, and the glass of the windows appeared blurred. However, the most striking thing was the inhabitants. The people in the village wore ancient clothing. Their faces were haggard, and their eyes were vacant. They looked like they were from another era, as if they had been worn down by the passage of years. However, when they saw Jack's car drive into the village, their gazes became unusually warm. Jack stopped the car and looked at the residents with some nervousness in his heart. He opened the car door and stepped out. An older man stepped forward, a smile on his face, but an elusive emotion in his eyes. "Welcome to Phantom Village, Mr. Jack." The man's voice was filled with an odd magnetism, as if it carried some unspeakable power. Jack nodded politely, the tension in his mind gradually easing. He tried to appear calm, despite all the feelings he had about this place. "Thank you," Jack said, his voice shaking a little. "I received a letter and was invited here." The man smiled and nodded without speaking. He held out his hand and beckoned Jack to follow him. Reassured, Jack locked his car and followed the man to an old inn in the center of the village. The facade of the inn had peeled away a bit, and the wooden frames of the doors and windows looked old and sturdy. The man pushed open the door, and Jack followed. They entered a dimly lit hall with some old paintings on the walls showing some historical views of the village. "Have a seat." The man gestured for Jack to sit in one of the old wooden chairs. "We have awaited your arrival." Jack sat down, his mind filled with questions. He looked around and realized that there were a few other people here, apparently invited as well. They all had an expression of anticipation and curiosity. "I know you must have a lot of questions," the man continued, his voice mysterious in the dimly lit setting. "But in due time, Everything will be answered. Jack nodded, curiosity growing in his mind. He knew that there must be many untold stories hidden behind this mysterious phantom village, and he had stepped into the center of it. Night crept in, and the lobby of the hotel was illuminated by dim lights. Jack sat with the other invitees in anticipation of what was to come. There was some good food on the table, but Jack realized that his appetite didn't seem to be very good. Off to the side of the hall, men and a few villagers began to prepare something. Jack couldn't see much, but he sensed the atmosphere becoming more tense. They talked softly, occasionally looking up at Jack and the others, making the whole scene seem a bit unusual. As time went on, an eerie atmosphere filled the room, and Jack felt a pressure coming from all sides, as if the entire hotel was filled with an unnameable energy. His heart raced, and he began to feel a little suffocated. Suddenly, the lights in the hall began to fade, and a huge candle was lit, casting a dim glow. The man walked to the center of the hall, seemingly preparing himself for what was about to happen. Jack couldn't help but hold his breath, his eyes locked on the man. Honored invitees, the man's voice echoed through the hall with a mysterious magic. Thank you for coming to the Phantom Village. We are here for a special night. As the man's words trailed off, the hall suddenly filled with low mutterings. Jack looked around the room. The expressions of the other invitees carried varying degrees of excitement and nervousness. The man continued, "Tonight, we will reveal to you the truth about the Phantom Village. Have you all ever sensed another presence in this world? Ever suspected that there is some sort of power lurking in the darkness?" Jack's heart raced, and his thoughts became confused. He began to recall his experience on the mountain road, the blurry figure and the strange voice. He felt as if he was caught in a dream from which there was no escape, and which was now about to be unveiled in mystery. The man's voice sounded again. "Let's enter the preparation stage of the ceremony. Please relax and listen in silence." With the man's words, the lights in the hall gradually turned ghostly, and a dim glow enveloped the entire space. Jack felt as if he was surrounded by an invisible force as his vision began to blur and the scene around him began to distort. He tried to stand up, but his body wouldn't obey him, as if he was bound by a powerful energy. He felt that he had been brought into a strange state, and his consciousness began to wander between reality and illusion. In his vision, the scene around him became distorted and twisted, as if he had been brought into a world of illusions and unnameable things. He tried to stay awake, but he felt that he was gradually losing his grip on reality. In this psychedelic state, Jack began to feel an intense fear and uneasiness. He didn't know exactly where he was, or if he would ever be able to free himself from this phantasmagoria. His heart began to beat rapidly, as if something unpredictable was about to happen at any moment. Over the course of the vanishing night, Jack's consciousness seemed to be gradually swallowed up into a fog from which there was no escape. In the darkened hall, the lights dimmed and the atmosphere became more and more mysterious. Jack's consciousness seemed to be trapped in a distorted reality, and he felt as if he was floating in an unreal world. The scenery around him became blurred, and he could barely distinguish between reality and illusion. The man's voice sounded again, carrying a deep power. "Now, let us begin the ceremony to reveal the secrets of the spectral Shadow Village." In the center of the hall, a bonfire was set up, the flames dancing in the darkness and casting strange shadows. Men stood around the bonfire, and villagers gathered around it, forming a mysterious circle. Jack was mesmerized by the scene, his eyes locked on the flames. As the man gestured, the flames in the bonfire began to become abnormally jumpy, as if responding to his call. The firelight reflected on the man's face, making his expression even more mysterious. The man's voice echoed through the hall. On this night, we will intertwine with the past and future of the spectral Shadow Village and commune with the forces hidden in the darkness. Jack felt as if he was trapped by the glow of the flames. His consciousness seemed to be guided and drawn into this mysterious ritual. He was filled with conflicting emotions. On one hand, he felt fear. On the other, he longed to uncover the truth about the Phantom Village. As the man chanted, the villagers began to whisper an ancient incantation, the sounds gradually converging into a strange wave of sound filled with breathtaking power. The flames seemed to become even hotter, forming a strange vortex around the campfire. Jack felt his body being pulled by an invisible force, and it was as if his consciousness was swept into this vortex of flames. He saw himself being projected into a completely different space, surrounded by visions and strange patterns. In this illusion, he saw an ancient picture depicting the history of the Phantom Shadow Village. He saw the founding of the village, the inhabitants performing rituals, and the effects of dark forces. The images intertwined to form a twisted tale that seemed to convey some sort of message to him. Jack felt his consciousness become clearer and clearer, as if he could understand the meaning behind these images. Just then, he suddenly felt a powerful energy that seemed to be pouring out of the underground of the Phantom Village. He felt connected to the history of this place, and he began to realize that the spectral Shadow Village was not just an ordinary village. There was a dark secret hidden behind it, a power associated with ghosts and visions. Jack's consciousness gradually freed itself from the illusion, and he returned to the real world. The atmosphere in the hall became calmer. The flame of the bonfire gradually diminished and the light gradually dimmed. The man looked at Jack and smiled. "You have already seen part of the truth of the Phantom Village, but there is still more waiting to be discovered." Jack felt an unspeakable emotion fill his heart. He knew that he had stepped into a world of mystery and terror, and he would have to continue to explore the mysteries. In this hidden ritual, his life changed forever, and he would face even more incredible challenges and adventures. As that mysterious ritual ended, Jack felt his consciousness gradually return to the real world. He sat on the ancient wooden chair, and the hall around him seemed quiet and empty. The afterglow of the bonfire faded, leaving a dimness. His heart was still beating rapidly, and his thoughts were filled with images of what he had just experienced. He wanted to clear his head, trying to separate the visions from reality. However, he knew that the secrets of the Phantom Shadow Village had not been fully revealed, and he still had a long way to go. The door to the hall slowly opened, and the man walked in. There was a hint of deep meaning in his eyes, as if he knew what kind of turmoil Jack was going through inside. "You've seen part of it," the man said, "but the secrets of the Phantom Village are far more complex and deeper than you could ever imagine." Jack nodded, his lips moving but no words coming out. He felt as if his words were bound, and he didn't know how he should express the turmoil and conflict within him. The man smiled and walked up to him, reaching out and patting his shoulder gently. Jack felt a strange power pass through the man's palm, as if it were a soothing and a warning. "You have been chosen," the man's voice whispered in Jack's ear. "The Phantom Village needs your help, and you will be a part of us." Jack's eyes gazed at the man. His heart was full of conflict. He wanted to run away from it all, wanted to go back to his peaceful life. Yet, his curiosity and desire for unknown power felt overwhelming. "I know you have many questions," the man said, his voice soft but firm. "In the coming days, you will gradually learn about the origins and mission of the Phantom Village. But before that, you will need to undergo a terror awakening." Jack's brow furrowed as he wondered what the man's words meant. However, in the next moment, He felt his consciousness begin to warp once again as he was swept into a darkness by a powerful energy. In the darkness, he began to see blurry images, horrors, and visions intertwined. He saw forgotten pasts, dusty memories, and nightmares from which he could not escape. His heart began to tremble, and his breathing became rapid. He felt as if he was caught up in an endless horror, his heart eroded by dark emotions that he could not extricate himself from. He wanted to cry out for help and relief, but his voice was drowned in this darkness. As the terror awakens, Jack's consciousness undergoes test after test. His insides are stripped away, his fears magnified. He felt as if he had lost himself. He was consumed by the darkness and controlled by the visions. However, just when he was almost completely consumed, he suddenly felt a strong force of will emerge from within. He broke free of that darkness with all his might, and his consciousness returned to the real world. He realized that he was still sitting on the old wooden chair, and the lights in the hall were dim and calm. His heart was racing and sweat was seeping from his forehead. He knew that the horrible awakening he had just had was a test, a challenge to his willpower and courage. The man walked over to him and said with a smile, "You have successfully survived the terror awakening, and your heart has become stronger. Now you are ready for more challenges and truths." Jack's breathing steadied as he felt his heart grow stronger. Although he still didn't know all the secrets of the Phantom Village, he decided to move on, unraveling more mysteries and exploring more mysteries. After the terror awakening, he had awakened a power he had never known before, and he would use it to face the unknown future. With the end of the horrible awakening, peace gradually returned to Jack's heart. He sat down in the old wooden chair, and the hall around him fell silent once more. The man stood silently, watching Jack as if waiting for his reaction. Jack looked up, determination in his eyes. He knew he had stepped into a world of mystery and danger, but he no longer felt fear, but a desire to explore the unknown. "Tell me," Jack's voice was calm and determined, "what is the truth about the Phantom Village? Why was I chosen, and what kind of mission will I face?" The man smiled and nodded, as if satisfied with Jack's determination. "All the questions you ask will be answered in due time," he said. "But for now, I will reveal a part of the truth for you." The man's voice became more solemn. The Phantom Village was born in ancient times. It is not part of the human world, but rather an existence that connects between the realm of illusion and reality. The meaning of this village's existence is to maintain the balance between the two worlds. The residents of the Phantom Village are not ordinary humans. They are messengers who have mastered the power of the illusion realm. They are able to traverse the illusionary realm and reality, connecting the two worlds in a bond. However, this power is not nothing to be trifled with. It needs to be mastered and guided. Jack's eyes twinkled with curiosity and doubt. "And what is the reason I was chosen?" The man's gaze deepened. "You are a special person who possesses the ability to connect with illusions deep within your soul. Within you flows an ancient bloodline that allows you to enter the Phantom Village and interconnect with the illusionary realm. Your mission is to protect the balance of the Phantom Village, stop the dark forces from encroaching, and ensure that the illusion and reality do not get out of control. You will be the guardian of the Phantom Village, using your strength and courage to defend against all possible threats." Jack took a deep breath as he felt the burden on his shoulders become heavier. However, his inner resolve grew stronger. "I will do everything in my power to fulfill my mission and protect the balance of the Phantom Village." The man smiled and nodded, his eyes filled with anticipation. "You have shown courage and determination. Next, you will receive more training and revelations as you delve deeper into the origins of the Phantom Village and your mission." With the conclusion of this conversation, Jack knew that he had stepped into a whole new journey. He would face more challenges and difficulties, but he would also discover more truth and power. He is ready to explore this world of fantasy and horror in order to preserve the balance and guard the truth. At the end of this chapter, his determination and courage will guide him forward to face the unknown future head-on. Day in and day out, Jack receives training and revelations at the Phantom Village. He learned to master the power of illusion and understood the history and mission of the Phantom Village. He developed a deep connection with the other residents and gradually became part of this mysterious world. However, over time, a conflict grew within him. While he understands his mission, he also begins to question the true meaning of this power. He wanted to return to the real world, to his family and friends, to live a peaceful life. One night, as the lights dimmed in the hall, he sat quietly in his room. His heart was filled with struggle as he began to wonder if there was a way to escape this mysterious world and return to the reality he knew so well. Just then, the door was suddenly pushed open gently, and an older woman walked in. Her gaze was gentle and seemed to penetrate Jack's heart. "You have doubts." The woman's voice was like a breeze, gently swirling in Jack's ears. "You want to return to the real world, don't you?" Jack nodded, his voice a little low. "I understand my mission, but I also miss my family and friends. I don't know if there is a way to get back to them." The woman smiled and walked over to him, sitting in the chair across from him. "Your struggle is normal, but you must understand that the existence of the Phantom Village is vital to the entire world. Your mission to protect the balance is a noble and sacred responsibility." Jack's gaze grew determined. "I know, but do I have a choice? Is there a way to escape this world and return to reality?" The woman stared into his eyes as if she was trying to probe the depths of his heart. "Escape is possible, but the cost is great. You will lose your connection to the illusionary world and those special abilities. You will return to the real world, but you will also have abandoned your mission to guard the balance." Jack lapsed into silence, his insides struggling. He knew that no matter what he chose, there would be sacrifices and costs. Thoughts of his family welled up in his heart, but at the same time, he felt the responsibility of his mission. The woman's voice sounded again. "Make your choice, whether it's to stay in the Phantom Shadow Village or return to the real world. It will require you to pay a price. But you must understand that your choice will affect the fate of the entire world." Jack's eyes firmed up, and he knew he had made his decision. He was willing to take up his mission to protect the balance of the Phantom Village and continue to explore this world of fantasy and horror. "I will not run away." Jack's voice echoed firmly in the room. "I will stay in the Phantom Village and fulfill my mission." The woman smiled and nodded, her gaze full of approval. "You have made a wise choice, Jack. Your courage and determination will help you overcome all obstacles and reveal more of the truth." As this conversation ended, Jack felt his inner conflict dissipate. He knew that his path, though difficult, was the right one. He was ready to move on, to face the unknown future, to guard the balance and reveal the truth. At the end of this chapter, his heart grows stronger, and his resolve will lead him on a more complex and challenging journey. As time passed, Jack spent many days in the Phantom Village. He received training, learned more secrets, and developed deep friendships with the other residents. He gradually adapted to this mysterious world and felt more confident in his mission. However, deep in his heart, the longing for the real world was always there. He missed his family and friends, the familiar landscape and daily life. He knew that he had made the right decision, but the tugging at his heart persisted. One night, as he stood at the border of the spectral Shadow Village, gazing at the junction of illusion and reality, his heart was filled with conflict. He wanted to return to the real world and reunite with his family, but at the same time, he knew his mission was far from complete. Just then, A voice rang in his ears. "Jack, what is your decision? Are you willing to remain in the Phantom Shadow Village and guard the balance? Or do you want to return to reality and give it all up?" Jack turned his head and saw the older woman, her gaze filled with concern. His heart was once again in a struggle as he pondered his options. Returning to the real world meant abandoning the mission of the Phantom Village, but he was also able to reunite with his family. Staying in the Phantom Village meant continuing to guard the balance, but he would be far away from his family. Jack's eyes firm up. "I have decided to return to reality and reunite with my family. While I understand my mission, I also long to return to a familiar life." The woman smiled and nodded, her voice gentle. "Your choice is understood, Jack. Your courage and determination will remain in your heart wherever you go." With the woman's words, Jack felt his body gradually enveloped in a shimmering layer of light. His vision began to blur as the scene around him faded. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself in a familiar setting. He stood in front of his home and saw the smiles of his family and friends. Their gazes were filled with joy and surprise. "Jack, you're finally back." His mother walked quickly towards him and hugged him tightly. Jack felt the warmth of his family and his heart was filled with joy. Although he knew that his choice meant giving up the mission of the Phantom Village, he also knew that he would retain that experience and courage forever. In the real world, Jack gradually adapted to the mundane and settled back into the rhythm of everyday life. At night, however, he often gazed at the stars and contemplated that mysterious world. He knew that no matter where he went, he would retain the memory of the Phantom Village within him, and his courage would continue to guide him into an unknown future. This was the end of his road to escape and a new beginning.